Ladies and gentlemen, obviously you are interested in seeking answers to the question, are there distinctive roles for fathers and mothers? And so we will be exploring that in this session. I don't want to take too much of our speakers' time. My name is Candi Finch. I teach at Southwestern Seminary in the Women's Studies Department. I teach classes like Biblical Theology, Womanhood, and Biblical Model for the Home and Family. So I'm as eager as you are to hear our presentations today. Our first speaker, you've probably heard her if you were in the main session, Jenet Erickson. She is an adjunct professor at Brigham Young University. She got her PhD in family social science, and her research area focuses on the well-being of mothers and children. She'll be today about dads don't mother and moms don't father, the distinctive influence of mothers and fathers and children's development. Welcome today. Social science is at the top of this little thing that we can see, the evidence of the complementarity of mothers and fathers, and there's so much more that we'll come to understand and appreciate about the distinctions that are part of our gender that also enhance and bless children. In the late 1970s, Azim Surani, with the new technique of in vitro fertilization, set out to try to create new life using genes from just one, either the mother or the father, by duplicating those genes. Everything about science said that with just those chromosomes, with the right number of chromosomes, life would develop normally. But the eggs with only the mother's genes could not survive. A similar fate met the eggs implanted with just the father's genes. He came to discover that these maternal and paternal genes appeared completely indistinguishable, yet expressed themselves differently in that child, depending on whether or not they came from a mother or father. And both were essential to the survival of that egg. This finding parallels what social science teaches us about the importance of mothers and fathers in children's development. Like the complementarity of the left and the right halves of the brain, each brings distinct capacities that provide complementary and even critical contributions to children's development. Let's start with what it tells us about mothers and fathers' influence on social development, on children's emotional and social development. Mothers are biologically primed to provide nurturing oriented towards an attachment relationship, similar to what Dr. Grossman mentioned, beginning in utero. They're primed to do that. Just as one part of that, dramatic increases in oxytocin and oxytocin receptors, you've heard about the bonding hormone oxytocin, during the process of giving birth and caring for infants act like a switch in mothers, turning on maternal behaviors. Moms find themselves expressing positive feelings, affectionately touching, cooing, and gazing at their infants. You've all seen it. Infants' levels of oxytocin similarly parallel their mothers, producing feelings of calm and well-being that similarly bond mother and offspring. And interestingly, when an infant is outside the presence of the mother, in a daycare situation, for example, we watch biologically cortisol, the stress hormone levels, rise over the day, whereas in the presence of the mother, they decrease over the day, making some think about what the effects of daycare are in terms of stress responses among infants. But fathers also experience physiological changes in the process of their wife giving birth and them caring for this child. The same hormones elicit different types of responses. Where oxytocin produces a certain kind of mothering type of behavior for women, it produces a different kind of behavior in men, in fathers. And it is associated with stimulatory behaviors like tickling and bouncing. How many of you have seen that? Brought the baby up and he's throwing this child up into the air. And the mother's thinking, what are you doing? Mothers are more likely to coo and cuddle, and fathers are much more likely to tickle and toss. And there's a biological explanation for those behaviors that actually benefit that child, much to mothers who we don't appreciate. With this biological foundation, consider differences in developing identity and emotional capacity. A mother's abilities are uniquely oriented toward identity formation and emotional security, the internal development of that child. Her ability to detect, interpret, and respond in positive, non-intrusive ways to her infant's needs has been identified as the strongest and most consistent predictor of a child's social, emotional, and cognitive development. Neuropsychological studies indicate that mothers have a unique ability to sensitively modify, without even knowing it, to modify the input that they give that child as an infant in ways that match the inner state of the infant and provide the optimal bits of information needed for the brain of that infant to develop. And we can watch that process happen without her even being aware. In this secure attachment relationship, children develop their own sense of identity while learning to appreciate, understand, and empathize with the feelings of others. From infancy on, children are much more likely to seek out their mothers for comfort in times of stress, and mothers are more likely to identify, ask about, listen to, and discuss emotions with children. This emotional attunement is important for a child's development of their self-awareness and emotional well-being, as well as conscience and a moral awareness of the needs of others. Fathers complement these patterns. Lest we think mothers are everything, fathers complement these patterns in their contributions to children's social and relational capacities. Where mothers seem particularly adept at that inner sense of identity, fathers influence how children relate to the outside world. Consider, for example, how fathers hold their infants. As soon as a mother gets an infant, she turns inward, as much body contact as possible with that infant and child. What does a dad do? Turns it out. Football hold. I could not figure out why my husband did this. For months and months, all around the church, this child was like that. Or up over their shoulder, orienting them to a view of the outside world, what the father himself is seeing, where mother is protecting and orienting them on the inside. Father's involvement with their children consistently predicts how they relate to others. Closeness during adolescence has been identified as a key predictor of empathy in adulthood, as well as marital relationship quality and extramarital relationship quality in adulthood. In contrast, you're all aware of this, lack of father involvement has repeatedly been associated with criminal and delinquent behaviors, even into adulthood. For boys, the mere presence of a man in the home, a father, stepfather in the home, predicts less delinquent behaviors. Some of this may be in part because of the discipline style of fathers. Fathers intervene to discipline less frequently than mothers do. But when they do, they exhibit more consistency and less flexibility in what those outcomes are going to be. How many of you experience that, right? And children, in turn, are more likely to comply. Sometimes that is so frustrating. And they describe a sense of perceiving more authority from that father, as if he has more authority. Now, interestingly, mothers are really important in this process. Mothers tend to use more reason and flexibility in carrying out consequences, which is also important for children to learn. To know that there's structure and there's ways to reason through what happens. More significantly, however, fathers influence children's social relationship capacity through their play. Fathers are much more likely than mothers to engage with their child in play. And that is powerful. It's been predictive of the quality of children's peer relationships repeatedly. Fathers who spent more time in positive play with their children have children with the highest peer ratings. When fathers were more responsive, patient, and playful, less coercive, children showed less aggressiveness and more peer confidence and were better liked. As one reporter noted, and I should catch up here, fathers in play is really important. Roughhousing with dad appears to teach children how to deal with aggressive impulses and physical contact without losing control of their emotions. They learn how to interface with others in healthy ways without losing control. This allows fathers, as children grow, fathers engage in more peer-like verbal play. So they're more likely to use sarcasm and other things with children in a context of security that also helps that child develop confidence and a confidence in interfacing with their peers. Consider then academic development or the cognitive development. You can see mothers seem to have a particularly unique capacity for providing just the right kind of emotionally sensitive, cognitively stimulating interactions. And they're much more likely to focus on teaching. Where fathers, for example, when you see this, they'll take a toy and they'll use it in a way the toy was not intended to be used. And move with it and do some kind of stimulating type of activity with it. The mother will point to the object and teach the child about it. What it looks like, how it sounds, those kind of things. This verbally rich teaching focus has really important implications for cognitive development. Fathers complement these foundational contributions. When fathers are involved and playful and nurturing, children exhibit higher IQs, language development, and cognitive skills, and we'll talk about maybe why. One explanation for this is that children with involved fathers show a social emotional readiness for school. That can partly explain why young boys are struggling in school, right? In the case that we have many who are not spending enough time with fathers, that development is inhibited. Just the preparedness for school. Fathers also uniquely influence children's vocabulary development. They're much more likely to use a word a child cannot understand in a way that helps them grow vocabulary, and a mother will change vocabulary to make sure the child does understand. In terms of academic achievement, children, and this so explains what's happening with young men in our culture. Children with involved fathers are 43% more likely to earn A grades, 33% less likely to repeat a grade, and 98% to 105% more likely to graduate from college. Part of this is due to the fact that involved fathers help with homework and provide financial support. Involved fathers also monitor and help children avoid activities that would inhibit them from doing well in school. Indeed, one great fathering scholar will say, fathers seem to uniquely be able to foster a learning environment with just the right amount of engagement, affection, and supervision. Most significantly, fathers build capacity, and I really love this, by orienting children toward learning in unique ways that are unique from a mother. First, fathers' interactions are characterized by arousal, excitement, and unpredictability in a way that stimulates openness to the outside world, with an eagerness to explore and discover. Second, fathers have a unique ability to encourage risk-taking while ensuring safety and security. Yeah, you can climb it, keep going, keep trying, right? And no! Third, fathers consistently focus on helping children do things independently and find solutions to their own problems. You can make your own peanut butter sandwich, right? As opposed to the mother, which kind would you like? Finally, fathers tend to be more demanding cognitively. They require children to demonstrate more than mothers their understanding of the topic. When they watch mothers and fathers engage with a child on a task, if a child's having trouble, what does the mother do? Step in and help. You know how to do this, I can help you do this. Fathers withhold and say, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, without intervening to offer the help that would help the child solve it. Then finally, this last section focuses on, bear with me up here. These are really unique and important orientations that fathers give, and we have not appreciated them enough in terms of children's academic abilities. The last area is on gender identity and sexual development. It would make perfect sense that a child would need exposure to both the opposite sex from me parent and the same sex from me parent to understand their own sex, their own gender. And I could read you powerful quotes of children struggling when they don't have that opportunity to understand who they are. Margaret Mead has said, one of the most important learnings, and you know Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist, who was not a Christian, by the way, but understood this powerful truth about children. One of the most important learnings for every human child is how to be a full member of its own sex, and at the same time fully relate to the opposite sex. This is not an easy learning. It requires the continuing presence of a father and a mother. Fathers and sexual development. So powerful is the influence of fathers on girls, and we'll talk about how they influence boys, but researchers have concluded that fathers set the reproductive strategy girls use for the rest of their lives. Father absence is the single greatest risk factor for teen pregnancy in girls. Perhaps, as Professor Brad Wilcox concludes, this is because girls raised in homes with their fathers are more likely to receive the attention, affection, and modeling that they need to rebuff young men who do not have their best interests at heart. For boys, the effects on sexual development are just as significant, but manifest themselves differently. Without the closeness and modeling of a father, boys engage in what David Popenoe calls compensatory masculinity, exhibited in rejecting and denigrating anything feminine, while seeking to prove masculinity through violent and aggressive domination. In contrast, boys raised in homes with fathers are more likely to acquire the sense of self-worth and self-control that is central to a form of masculinity that is protected and respectful in experiencing women and femininity. In each of these areas, I'll just conclude, the natural complementarity between mothers and fathers' parenting traits is incredibly precise, meaning they balance one another in very precise ways. Mothers do not father, and fathers do not mother. Both mothers and fathers are needed to create life, and both are important in facilitating the nurturing of that life.
Questions for the panelists. Our next presentation is from Ruel Haymond. He's been a teacher and mentor at American Heritage School since 2007. He teaches 12th grade classes, such things as constitutional law and economics. I know you're going to enjoy hearing from him. His subject, as you can see, is godly fatherhood, the firm foundation of boys and nations.
Erickson said about the oxytocin happiness experience after birth. When my wife had our fourth child, it was the best of the 7 births that she had. And I remember we were in bed that night after the birth, and I could not sleep because all she could do was say, "I'm so happy, I'm so happy." Isn't he beautiful? Go to sleep. It's a very beautiful memory.
Can you speak louder, please?
Yeah, okay. So my topic today is godly fatherhood, the firm foundation of boys and nations. A note to my own father. Dear Dad, I love you. It has been 8 years since your death, and I still ask myself the following questions. Why did you abandon your religion? Why did you abandon your faith in God? Where were you when I needed you? You were there, but you were never really there. I'm 47 years old, and the pain is still real. In 1999, the National Center for Fathering administered a poll to answer the following question. What is the most significant family or social problem facing America? The answer? Fatherlessness. The physical absence of the father from the home, or the presence of a father who is absent emotionally and spiritually. Now in 2015, a recent article was published, The Plague of Fatherlessness. This presentation will focus on what contributes to fatherless homes, specifically the impact of irreligion and the effects of ungodly fatherlessness on the hearts and minds of boys, and then how those effects dangerously influence society. Finally, I will share essential principles that godly fathers live by and lead by, as well as examples of faithful fathers. Stephen Baskerville of Howard University, in his publication, The Fatherhood Crisis, cited the following as probable causes of fatherlessness. The availability of welfare, the growing acceptance of single mothers in society, the increase of childbearing outside of marriage, but the most prevalent cause of fatherlessness, of course, is divorce. In America, an estimated 24.7 million children live without their biological fathers. My sincere desire today is to persuade you that godlessness is a fatherless factor that must be taken very seriously. Fathers who do not know God, their heavenly Father, in too many cases suffer in their relationships with their own sons. Such fathers too often do not teach how to respect life, women and children, or the value of repentance and forgiveness. Their sons and daughters do not experience the special sense of security and enhanced feeling of belonging that good fathers bring to a home. Faithless fathers fail to demonstrate that marriage is ordained of God, that the role of husband and wife, mother and father and mother are sacred and essential to God's plan for the happiness of His children. When fathers fail in their God-given role, through ignorance, bias, or neglect, when they violate marital vows through infidelity or immorality, when fathers do not recognize their God-given and God-sanctioned responsibilities, they lack vision and they with their sons perish. Remember, as the home goes, so goes a nation. One learned philosopher of the late 1700s stated that when individuals lack faith in or completely disbelieve in life after death, national iniquity or inequity increases. said he, Providence or God has awfully warned mankind against atheism by the ruin of the greatest empire in the world, Rome. Reigning atheism like a gangrene rapidly dissolved the Roman Republic and caused its destruction. Rome was ruined by this vile doctrine. Similar to the American founding documents, the Roman Constitution was originally interwoven with strong principles of religion which continued in force during the prosperous times of the Republic. Polybius, an eminent scholar of the time, ascribed Rome's superiority over other nations to her belief in life after death. Quoting again our philosopher, religion is the most valuable security to states by its general influence on men of diverse characters and condition. This is an opinion held not only by the good and wise in the world, but by every thinking man and woman. Religion is a check on every vicious disposition. And he asks these questions. Would it be wise to remove this one strong chain from ungovernable men and boys and let these ungoverned persons loose on society? Research done by the Children's Legal Foundation highlights some of the potential and perishing consequences fatherless boys may face individually. In the realm of antisocial behavior, fatherless boys seem to be masters of misery. Of these American boys, 90% of homeless and runaways are fatherless. 70% in juvenile detention centers are fatherless. 75% in chemical abuse centers. 85% of prisoners. 86% of psychotic delinquents and 80% of rapists come from fatherless homes. Finally, fatherless boys, 85% have behavioral disorders, many struggle with sexual conflict and gender identity issues, and 63% of successful suicides can be traced to homes without dad. Now this is where it gets interesting. Now extrapolating, let's take a glimpse of what were the effects of faithless fatherlessness in a past democracy, according to Socrates. Compare what he says on the left, compare the statistics on the left to the ones on the right. Young men or fatherless men of democracy, this is in Rome, in Greece. Young men of democracy are eager for revolution. They seek a life of idleness of body and mind, focusing on useless and unnecessary pleasures. They hate and conspire against those who have got property. They have a vulgar and miserly way. They have competing factions in their souls, and they indulge in the appetite of the hour. This is thousands of years ago. They cease to care even for laws written or unwritten. These boys and men chafe impatiently at the least touch of authority, and at length they go to war with themselves. Ominously states Socrates, they will have no one over them. What's significant, and this isn't in my slideshow, tyranny, a tyrannical state, is what follows when a country or a state is filled with these types of men and boys. Isaiah of the Old Testament, so look at on the right column. Isaiah in the Old Testament describes the boys of his days as neighborhood oppressors, behaving proudly or insolently against the ancient or the elderly, even the base or vile against the honorable or those who should be honored. The influence of these oppressors of society leads to a warlike state. Paraphrasing Isaiah, O my young men, thy fathers caused thee to err and destroy the way of thy paths. Plato says war was within them, and Isaiah states national war was the result of such behavior. Where were the fathers? In our communities, particularly in areas where faithless fatherlessness runs rampant, there is war in our homes, schools, and streets and schools. Where are the fathers? Are there good fathers? Yes. There are good, even godly fathers in this world. Godly father leadership is essential to the health and happiness of home and country. As the English proverb states, one father is more than 100 schoolmasters, and I would add one father is more than any number of police officers in juvenile detention centers. When a father is connected to God, he recognizes that there is a power greater, kinder, more just, and more perfect that he can turn to for strength and direction. When his father looks to God, he lives and his sons live. In a world easily offended, virtuous fathers teach their boys how to forgive and understand. As permissiveness pervades hearts and homes, godly fathers lead young men in justice and order. Protecting, presiding, and providing are the providential priorities of fathers who are about God, their Father's business. Young men raised by such faithful heroes tend to live by and according to correct rules. They will be more likely to live by the best rule, the golden rule. Private and public virtue, the foundation of every sound individual and nation, are demonstrated consistently to fathers as they grow to manhood. Such fathers teach their boys that virtue is fulfilling the measure of their creation, the purpose for which they were created. You know that's the definition of virtue. Go to the 1828 edition. As virtues such as humility, morality, and fidelity are inculcated in the hearts and minds of young men, the sick are healed, the naked are clothed, the hungry are fed, the ignorant are educated, and the captive are liberated. Such a godly example of fatherhood is found in Ralph Moody's great American classic, Little Britches. Story of a young man at the turn of the 19th century in Colorado. His father, simply known as Father, teaches. First quote. There are only two kinds of men in this world, honest and dishonest men. Any man who says the world owes him a living is dishonest. The same God that made you and me made this earth, and He planned it so that it would yield every single thing that the people on it need. But He was careful to plan it so that it would only yield up its wealth in exchange for the labor of man. Any man who tries to share in that wealth without contributing the work of his brain or his hands is dishonest. Imagine our youth hearing these things. A man's character is like a house. If he tears boards off his house and burns them to keep himself warm and comfortable, his house soon becomes a ruin. If he tells lies to be able to do the things he shouldn't do but wants to, his character will soon become a ruin. A man with a ruined character is a shame on the face of the earth. And finally, you know, son, sometimes a fellow has to take a licking or a beating for doing the right thing. A licking only lasts a short while, even if it's a hard one, but failing to do the right thing will often make a mark on a man that will last forever. The influence of godly fathers will naturally go beyond the walls of their own homes. Leaving their families secure and safe, they venture into the world in every line of work, and whether they realize it or not, boys are watching. I was watching. In closing, I would like to share with you a true example of godly fatherhood in action. Officer Gonzalez, a part-time inner-city police officer, changed the lives of young men as a godly father figure. He works in an area infested with crime and poverty, knows the area well because he was born and raised there, but he was unique. He was raised by two parents who taught godly values and respect for the law. His father led by example and prepared his son for godly fatherhood. Officer Gonzalez loves his work and wants to help youth to reach a measure of their potential. He uses his influence to de-escalate difficult situations by a hug and kind words of encouragement, something completely against protocol. He even turns off the camera. He does this. At times, even while the juveniles were handcuffed and in custody, he would embrace them to show the true godly love he has for them. When uncuffed, he would often receive hugs back from them. Says he, I would rather be fired than miss out on these opportunities. Dad, Daddy, Papa, Papa, Father, please remember to look to God and live. Come home. When you bring heaven home, your boys and society, nations, are immeasurably blessed. Remember that no other success can compensate for failure in the home. Remember as well that no success can equal success in the home.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Warwick Marsh from Australia. Warwick is a family advocate, a social reformer, a musician, a TV producer, a writer, and a speaker. In 2002, Warwick and his wife Allison established Dads for Kids, the Fatherhood Foundation, specifically for children to encourage fathers and promote excellence in fathering through web, TV, radio, research, and policy development. He is a leader in the men's movement in Australia. He's well known for his advocacy for children, for marriage, for manhood, family, and fatherhood. We are looking forward to hear what he has to say to us today.
Thank you so much. It's really a great honour to be here in your wonderful country. We've been praying and fasting for you for quite some time. This last 3 years. I don't know if those involved in the prayer movement, and we've also been with that. So it's great to be here, to be at this World Congress of Families and to follow such great speakers. And to have Miriam coming after me is like, I mean, it's a dream come true. Let's give her a clap. So the unfortunate thing about being third is that everybody takes all your ideas. But let me just tell you, I think some of you might know the scripture. It says, the sins of the fathers will be visited the third and the fourth generation. I always thought that was very, very unfair. I don't know how you felt about that. And until I became a father. And I just want to tell you a bit of a story about my own life so you realise I'm not quite perfect, as you might imagine. My big dream growing up as a boy was to make nitroglycerine. I'd already made gunpowder and exploded several sort of things around the yard and around the place, but my big job was to make nitroglycerine. I'm glad I didn't ever make it, because I might have come here with only one hand and one leg. But the unfortunate reality is that I taught my kids how to make gunpowder, and so they used to. We all loved explosives. It was one of those things in the family line. I got a phone call one day from the high school, and it was the principal, and he said, "Your son has done something very, very serious." And of course I thought, well, what's he done? He's hit somebody, and he was the school captain, right? He was the school captain, so this is a very, very sort of sad phone call to get. And the principal said, "He's just blown up the toilet." I was trying not to laugh, and I said, "Oh, that's terrible." And what had happened, he went into the toilet with some small little crackers, I think they call them. I don't know what you call them here in America. And he was trying to do a scientific experiment to see how much water he could displace with one cracker. He blew the thing apart. What was worse, that he was the school captain, A, and B, he had a number of junior people observing this scientific experiment. This would cause great problems. So you can see that fathers are very, very important. Sometimes for all the wrong reasons. But Jenet's presentation was absolutely fantastic. Just give her a clap too. She actually, again, stole a lot of my notes, so I'm not going to go through all these notes, but she said something very interesting about the oxytocin levels and she didn't mention testosterone levels in fathers. They found out the oxytocin level goes up just before the baby's born, and it stays up for a number of months. But something else very interesting is that the testosterone level goes down 3 months before the baby comes. Ladies, aren't you glad? And it stays down for about 6 months. Now, they don't understand this, do they? The scientists don't understand, because you're talking about two different people, one in this body, one in that body, and the bodies are literally communicating, and scientists don't understand how this is working. But of course, there is someone that does. Is that right?
Yes.
The Father in heaven. And as our brothers pointed out, we need to have faith. And even the Romans bemoaned the fact of the lack of faith and the lack of morals in their society as they watched the society go downhill. This is something I'd like to show you that no one actually has stolen, which is very, very nice.
You're already there. Yep.
I'm going the wrong way. Yes. I think some of these statistics have already gone through here. Adolescent patients in chemical abuse centres, etc., etc. I've done a lot of work in prison, so my background is not as an academic as some of my dear friends here. My background actually is more of a songwriter, musician, who's got a deep interest in society and trying to do something. And with my family, I've travelled all over Australia and actually around the world. But we've done a lot of prisons in Australia. In fact, I've probably been in more prisons than most of you, which is probably maybe a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure. But the reality is that prisons are homes for fatherless men, aren't they? 70% of the statistics show that 70% of men in prison are fatherless. I was talking to a prison superintendent in Western Sydney, and I told him this statistic, and I said, "Tell me, is this true?" Because it's always interesting to sort of run the facts of science through the practitioners. And he said, "No, Warwick, it's 100%. I don't know if you've heard that, but he said that virtually everyone he saw in that prison had either no father or a significant problem with his father. And, you know, so there's those correlations there. Let me see if I can keep going here. And then we have those figures about high school dropouts and single mothers, which we've all gone through with these wonderful people here in my... It's actually very important to understand the incredible influence fathers have. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, which I'm sure some of my academic friends can testify, is that again, scientists don't fully understand this, but there is actually an IQ improvement with fatherhood involvement. It's only like 2 percentage points, it's not like massive, but when you think about it, in a very competitive educational society, 1 or 2 points, 2 or 3 points can actually be a big, big jump. And again, I encourage you, if you want to see your kids do well at school, dads, get them involved, be involved with them, have lots of fun, and of course that roughhousing is a very, very important thing. Everyone knows what roughhousing is. It's sort of like just, you know, rumbling and fighting and getting hurt. I just like to go through these, and again, it's important to realise that sometimes the scholars all say that, well, this is because of poverty, but they've actually done studies, haven't they? And they've shown that it actually is to do with mothers and fathers, and of course marriage is really, really important. There's 2 sides to the coin, I believe. There's fatherlessness and there's broken homes and lack of marriage. But when you have in great marriages and involved marriages, the fatherhood quotient goes up. And the greatest thing, men, a father can do for his children is what? Can anyone tell me?
Love his mother.
You guys are really educated. That's absolutely fantastic. I just want to get to this. This is interesting because none of these guys have actually robbed me of this statistic. This comes from Switzerland, and it's a very interesting statistic because it comes out of a huge cohort of it's actually a national, what's the word for it when they do a whole representative, they actually do the whole country, census, okay, thank you very much, census. And it's unusual they can ask these sort of questions, but in the Swiss census, this is going back 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they went through church attendance, and if the fathers were involved, and if the mothers were involved and everything else, this is what they found. If mothers goes to church and father doesn't, only 1 child in 50, or 2% of children will grow up to regularly attend church. Father goes to church and the mother does not, 22 children in 50, or 44% of children will become regular church attendees, and a large portion will become irregular attendees. Now, isn't that incredible? Our dear friend here, our brother here spoke, he showed that faith is really, really important for successful fatherhood, and I would argue the case. I work in the broad context in my own country, where even though we're quite small, we're the largest fatherhood group in Australia in the sense that we're probably the only one. And I've been with the National Fatherhood Initiative in Washington and Kansas City, which I'll be going to in a week's time with the National Fathering Centre. You've got some great organisations in this area of fatherhood. But they all agree that fathers are important and that faith and fatherhood are linked. But you know something, even if you don't understand the faith aspect, you've got to understand there's something here about leadership. Children follow dad. Now, I'm not saying that they will not follow mum, because mothers, your role is irreplaceable, as our dear friend who spoke first said. Your role is unique. But you know something, I heard a politician say that, and she summed up so well. She said, mothers nurture and fathers give identity to their children. They give the future, they give the sense of the future. I can remember doing these studies looking at all these studies, and I just want to, as I finish, tell you a very quick story. I grew up in a home that was divided. Great mother, great father, both had faith, which made it even harder to understand, and I'm sure there's some people here who've gone through that experience and maybe had that background. But I remember going from Australia a number of times and going across to Scotland and staying with grandmother. I thought every child stayed with their grandmother. Coming back and then going backwards and forwards. So the first 12 years of my life as a young boy, at least half it was without my dad. And you know, I can remember as a young man, probably about 30 years of age, I had this dream and I saw this man and woman walking against the sunset. It was like a silhouette. I didn't know who they were, and they had a little boy in the father's arms or the mother's arms. It didn't seem to matter. And the little boy was reaching out for calling out for daddy. The little boy was reaching out for mummy. Again, it just didn't seem to matter. And as I saw this dream, I began to weep, and I was sobbing in my dream. And of course, sometimes you think you're crying, but you're not in a dream. And I woke up, my pillow was wet with tears. And I thought to myself, what is that about? And I thought maybe I was going mad, there was something wrong with me. But I asked the question, and I felt the Holy Spirit there early that morning. I said, who is this little boy? And of course, the Holy Spirit said, it's you. And of course, the tears kept coming and coming. We have a fatherless country, unfortunately, in Australia, and we're following the footsteps of America, but we can turn it around. We can make a difference, man, and it's up to us, because the scripture says in Malachi 4:6 to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers. Where does it start? I'll say it again. To turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers. Where does it start? Fathers. Fathers, thank you, men. As I finish, I'll give you 3 points. You've got to get on the bus. You've got to get on the fatherhood bus, men. I'm talking to you now. Ladies, you're doing a great job as mothers. I can't comment about this. You've got to be there. So the first letter in the word bus is what?
Be there.
So you've got to be there. You've got to actually be in the moment, hang out, get down with their level, talk to them, play with them, whatever you're doing, throw them in the air, and make sure you catch them. Tree, make sure you want to catch them as well, right? So mother will let them climb the tree again. The U stands for unconditional love. Say it with me.
Unconditional love.
It's the same here in America as in Australia. There's nothing greater, nothing more beautiful than when fathers can love through all situations and all circumstances, you know, and just show that love, because children are looking for love, and they're especially looking for that love from the father. They're almost guaranteed it from the mother, aren't they, in a sense, because to be a mother is to sacrifice. It's a pain, it's blood, sweat and tears, quite literally. But fathers have to learn that, and that's one of the reasons that myself and my brother here are working so hard. What does the last S stand for? Make your children feel special. Make your children feel special. If you don't make your children feel special, men, who will? And for what reasons? You understand what I'm saying? It's so, so important. So listen, thank you so much for the privilege of speaking today. I hope it's been an encouragement. Thank you so much.
Our final speaker for this session is Miriam Grossman. And I'm really looking forward to what she has to say. Her book, Unprotected, I've enjoyed all of them, but her book, Unprotected, if you haven't read it, you need to get a copy of it. It's excellent, and it's eye-opening if you work with young women, what's happening on college campuses. She got her degree in psychiatry. She specializes she's certified in psychiatry and has a subspecialty in child and adolescent psychiatry. She's known internationally for her courage in breaking ranks and calling foul on the sexuality education industry. Her book, Unprotected, addresses that. She speaks to parents, students, educators, and policymakers and health professionals on the importance of childhood innocence and the dangers of a powerful sex education lobby that promotes so unfortunate sexual license instead of sexual health. Today she will be addressing the issue of new research on mother-baby bonding. Welcome her.
Thank you so much. I'm very moved by all of you here, packing the room and sitting on the floor and just standing by the wall. And oh, you can't hear me?
No, we can't hear.
Oh boy. I'm very, very moved by all of you being here, by this big crowd of people, your babies and strollers and standing by the wall, and just, I'm very, very moved by all this, and it means a lot to me to have you here. There was once a very holy rabbi who would study the mystical books of Judaism that have the inner secrets of the Torah. And the story goes that once while he was studying his holy books, he heard his grandson crying outside. And so he closed the book and he went outside and asked his grandson what happened. And the grandson said that he was playing hide and seek with his friends, but he found a really, really good place to hide. And his friends looked for him, and they couldn't find him anywhere, and they gave up. And they went off and played a different game. So he was crying because of that. So his grandfather said, "You should know that this is what happens between God and man. God hides himself in this world. Sometimes he hides himself not so well, and sometimes he hides himself really, really well. And he wants us to look for him wherever he is hidden. And when we give up and stop looking for God, he cries." So, for me, studying medicine, the place that God is least hidden is in the area of reproductive medicine, female biology, and procreation, and mothers and their infants. And so I'm very, very excited for the first time to be talking on this subject. I've never discussed it before. And it's an area where I just see so much evidence of design and purpose and meaning. But in addition to all those things, I also see every time I open up a scientific journal or textbook, I see ammunition. We are at war, obviously. I'm not telling any of you anything that you don't know. We, those of us who believe that the natural family is the ideal for civilization and for children, we are at war. And I'm here to say that there is so much science that we need to use because it's ammunition, and it's like a weapon of mass destruction. The world has really gone mad. We're being told that these relationships are the same as this relationship. We are being told that conceiving a child and carrying a child and giving birth to a child is sort of like, I don't know, making a cake, like throwing the ingredients together in a bowl and mixing it up and just throwing it in the oven for 45 minutes at 350 degrees, and then the cake's done, and carry it away as if there's no special relationship between the mother and her infant. I'm obviously talking about surrogacy. We're being told that in raising children, biological bonds are disposable, and that children don't necessarily need their mother and their father, that all they need is love. So, I'm saying that the world is stark raving mad. And remember, I'm a psychiatrist. Now, the reason why hard science is such an amazing tool, such amazing ammunition for us, is that you can't argue with what you see under the microscope. You can't argue with MRIs and CAT scans. In the softer sciences, as they're called, the social sciences, it's a lot easier to come up with a study that kind of shows the results that you want. It's much harder, if not impossible, to do that with hard science. We talk a lot about God, and I'm a person of faith as well, but not everyone that we want to reach believes in God. But you can't argue with hard science. So science, I'm here to say, supports the natural family as the ideal, especially for children and especially for infants. Science shows that the attachment between mother and child is unique and powerful, and it begins before birth. Trust me, pregnancy is nothing like baking a cake. The first thing I want to tell you about is that when a woman, okay, thank you. A pregnant woman produces chemicals with distinct odors that she's never produced before. These chemicals are released beneath her arms and around her nipples. From the first moment of life, a baby recognizes the unique scent of his mother. He knows his mother already. A newborn placed on his mom's abdomen will crawl up toward the source of the scent, up toward the breast. Now how, if the baby was just born a few minutes ago, how does the baby know the scent of his mother? The answer is, he's been swimming in it okay, I thought I had another one. Yeah, that one. He's been swimming in it for many, many months. A woman, the amniotic fluid that surrounds the developing fetus smells and tastes like the woman does. Okay? And the fetus develops the ability to taste in the first and in the beginning of the second trimester. That's very, very early. That means that at birth, a mother's... I don't know this lady and her baby, and I didn't ask her to be here. But I'm so glad you are. So this baby, by the time he's born, has been floating and smelling and tasting his mother's unique scent for 6 months. When separated from their mothers, when separated from their mothers, newborns, okay, so this is a newborn, and they did this experiment where they have this like cotton that's been soaked in amniotic fluid. So it has the scent of the mother. And babies, when they have the scent of the mother in front of them, cry less. It's a soothing smell to them. And the reverse is also true, that moms can distinguish the odor of her newborn from that of others, from other babies. And that's because the baby has these unique pheromones that come off the top of the head. Now, I don't know about you, I have 4 grandchildren. I beg my kids when they're new babies, I just want to smell them. I just want to smell the baby. It's just, I've never been on heroin. That smell of the baby. And mothers tend to hold the baby. You were talking about holding the baby in a certain way. We want the baby, we want to be smelling those pheromones that are coming up. It just does something to us chemically. Now, what about a mother's voice? A fetus recognizes his mother's voice in 5 seconds. Okay, let me explain. Near term. Near term is referring in this study to 36 weeks gestation. So that's beginning the last month of pregnancy. A baby's heart rate and activity, movement, decreases when he hears his mother's voice, indicating that he is listening and orienting himself to it. This is a baby in utero, right? Not born in the beginning of the 9th month. They have experiments where the mom is recorded reading a passage from a book, and then other female voices are recorded reading the same passage, and they're able to study the movement of the baby and the heart rate of the baby, and it goes down So the baby stops moving that much and the heart rate goes down. It's an indication of focusing and orienting himself. He's listening to his mother's voice. It's been demonstrated that just a few hours after birth, newborns prefer their mother's voice over that of another female, and they also prefer their mother's native language. They can differentiate between languages. I'm reading this amazing book right now called Jephthah's Daughters, and it's just a remarkable book by Robert Oscar Lopez, and it is testimonies by individuals who have been, who were sperm or egg donated, and they're now adults or adopted, and they're writing about some of their experiences. So they have the most amazing thing, well, there's many amazing things, but he tells the story there of a woman whose earliest memory, and she's asked what is her earliest memory, it's of hearing beautiful music, beautiful music. The thing is that this woman was adopted, and her adopted parents were wonderful, wonderful people, but they were not at all musical. And so it was just a big mystery of where did this come from. When she was 30, she met her biological mom. She had been adopted at birth. The biological mom was a singer. She could remember her mother singing from before she was born. So, the biological bond between a mother and infant is unique and powerful, and it starts before birth. We all know how powerful a familiar scent or a voice can be, how one whiff of a scent that we recognize or a few words can calm us down and take us to a different world. You have to understand a newborn has been jolted into a harsh new reality by being born, and that new reality is bright lights and loud noises and being cold and hungry. You have to imagine that any reminder of that ideal life in utero is like being heavenly. So, of course, a baby wants to be close to mom, smelling mom, hearing mom, feeling her heartbeat. It's the closest that he can get to his ideal life before birth. Now, what about mom? What about the attachment that happens between mom and the infant? Well, there really is a mommy brain. But this is not what I'm referring to. Okay? I'm not referring to that kind of mommy brain. You probably all know already, and everyone else has mentioned, how oxytocin changes the female brain, and during pregnancy and labor and delivery, oxytocin levels are just sky high. They're never as high as they are during labor and delivery. And oxytocin affects the female brain, the male brain also, but especially the female brain, and it causes feelings of attachment and love and trust. When you compare two groups of moms that had a natural labor and delivery versus those who had a planned C-section, so they never go through labor and delivery, and you take those moms when their babies are 2 weeks old, and you scan their brains, use MRIs, and you compare the two groups of moms and how their brains react when their baby's crying. And the brains of the moms that went through the labor and delivery are more sensitive to the baby's cry. And that's the oxytocin that has primed the brain. I don't want anyone to feel bad about having a C-section, and I'm sure that you all are very well bonded with your kids. But this is just information that we can use to understand that the maternal brain, and that includes a surrogate mother who has offered to rent her womb, her brain is just as vulnerable and sensitive as anyone else's. And as she goes through her pregnancy and labor and delivery, her brain is being primed into becoming a mommy brain, a brain that's focused on the newborn, on taking care of the newborn, on bonding with the newborn.
Does inducing do the same thing? If you're induced, do you still get the same effect?
Could I do it later?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so because of those vast changes hormonally in a woman due to pregnancy, delivery, and nursing, the maternal brain actually changes, the structure of the brain changes, so that mothers are more attentive to, they learn how to be attentive to their young and better at taking care of them. It's a remarkable transition, and we've all seen it. Women who are, how should I put this in a nice way, self-absorbed before they give birth, and then we all see it. It's like suddenly, whoa, they're, you know what, they're focused. I mean, it happened to me. I was never into babies. I just have to say, I was never into babies. And I wondered, how am I going to do that, you know? And then, it's just the most amazing thing. You give birth, and that you'll just stand in front of a moving truck to keep anything from happening to that child. Okay, so this biology is wonderful to know, but like I said earlier, it's fuel for us. It's ammunition for us in our battle, because there is this new normal. There's all these ideas that are we are being bombarded with, and especially young people are being led to believe that this new family structure and these new ways of creating children are all equally good. And biology is saying no, there is an ideal. So I was just gonna, what's next? Oh, this is about how oxytocin next. In nursing, there's this whole beautiful process. I mean, I can't go through all of it. There's so much to say here, but just trust me, there's this beautiful, amazingly complex symphony that's going on. What I'm showing here is that the suckling of the infant affects the mother's brain because it causes more oxytocin to be released. Next. And then the oxytocin that has traveled to the mother's brain creates more milk for the child. And as the child nurses and gets that precious milk with all these amazing ingredients, including oxytocin, that affects the development of the child and the well-being of the child. And while the child is nursing, of course, he's inhaling that wonderful smell that he was smelling for 6 months, 7 months, or whatever, when he was in heaven, let's say. And, everyone knows you nurse a baby, he falls asleep, right? Well, he's in heaven, so he falls asleep. Again, so I'm just showing that it affects the baby's brain as well. Now, this has been discussed before, but mothering actually hardwires the infant brain, and it's been shown in mammals. This is a rat with her 5-day-old little ratling. And so they studied these little rats that were being mothered, being groomed and taken care of. And as you heard earlier, the brain activity of the little rats actually changed when their mother was in the nest, and it became more calmed down. And we know that the circuits of the brain, the development of the brain in the first days and hours and months of a newborn's life, it's very critical for those circuits in the brain to be wired properly. And we know now that mothering affects that wiring and that development of the brain. What do I have next? What's next? Oh, this actually shows that, that in the female brain, romantic love and maternal love is very similar. Next. Okay. What I wanted to say here is that in 18 different states in this country, there are laws that state you cannot remove a puppy from his mother until the puppy is at least 8 weeks old. And in Australia also? Yeah. So it's an acknowledgement, right, that it's inhumane to the puppies. The puppies need the mother needs the puppies. So my question is, if we're acknowledging this in 18 states, how about some regulation on surrogacy? We have no regulation of surrogacy, which is the intentional planning of separating a newborn from his mother after the moment of birth. This is a very, very famous book that I hope you're all aware of. I wrote on my blog not long ago that I think that we all need to make sure we have copies of this book because it's so politically incorrect. They might start burning this book. But this is a book called Are You My Mother? And it's about a little bird whose mother flies off to find him a worm before he's born, and then he comes out of his shell and his mother is gone. And he gets very upset and he runs around trying to figure out, are you my mother? And he asks the dog and the cat and an airplane and all these different things. He's looking desperately for his mother, and at one point he says, he gets very, frustrated, and he says, I have a mother, said the baby bird. I know I do. I will find her. I will. And this speaks volumes, because right now we are, because of third-party reproduction and donated sperm and surrogacy and donated eggs, we are creating a whole generation of people who don't know who their mothers and fathers are. And they are saying, I know that I have a mother and a father, and I will find them, whatever it takes. So, next. Oh, I almost forgot. So I wrote a new book, and it's a children's book, because all these years I've been sort of fighting and exposing all this stuff, sex ed and things that, I think are harmful. So I decided that what I want to do is create something good, instead of just complaining about all the bad stuff that's out there. So this is the first of what I hope will be a series. And it's called The Black and White Puppy, a story about the biology of love. And a lot of what I told you here today, the science about mothers and infants, is in this book, but it's in a way that if you can explain to a very small child about how unique that bond is. And don't worry, I also made a very big point of emphasizing the role of fathers and how crucial it is for children to know their fathers. Now, life isn't always perfect. And there are tragedies, and there is divorce, and there is death, and things happen, and there are wars, and families are separated. And I acknowledge that. Not every family has the biological mother and biological father around. But that doesn't mean that we stop holding up as an ideal what the ideal situation is for a child. And it's very important for a child to understand that. So I actually brought these in English and in Spanish with me, so I'm in the display area, and please come by if you'd like to take a look at it. So I just want to finish by saying that a baby is born already loving his mother. He's born knowing his mother, loving his mother's scent, her voice, the sound, the feeling of being next to her, her heartbeat. If that's not love, I don't know what is. So he doesn't need to learn to love her. She's not a stranger. It's the opposite. She is his entire universe. So science is saying that the bond between mother and child is unique, it is powerful, it begins before birth. Let's take this ammunition from hard science and use it. Thank you very much.